Good afternoon, and welcome to our session 4 on AI and chatbots. This is the last of our 4-part series. My name is Seth Early, and I'll be moderating today. Sharon, if you could just go to the first slide. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. First, about early information science. We are a professional services firm that works in the area of information architecture, knowledge management, content management, data architecture, and you can see this has lots of implications across different parts of your organization. I have to say this because I've had people after sessions say, do you guys do any consulting? So I just want to put that up front and say, yes, that is what we do. We are a professional services firm. I'm not going to spend time on this right now, but if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out. I mentioned this is a 4-part series. We have the other sessions that are recorded and archived, so you're welcome to download those and share them with your colleagues. And one of the things that I also wanted to let you know is I'm going to be speaking at a conference, Digital Workplace Experience, which is coming up in a couple of weeks in Chicago. This is put on by CMS Wire, and I realized that one of my sessions has a little bit of a provocative title. That was the idea of the organizer to make it a little bit interesting. The first one is on building chatbots and intelligent virtual assistants. I'm actually going to share some of our experience doing this, and how to think about intents, how to think about mapping out dialogues, the different technologies that are available, and really how to go about exploring in this area. So that'll be an interesting session. And the other is what to do when Watson fails. So it's a little bit of a presumption, but we have seen a lot of problems with these types of initiatives, and this is basically how you need to reset and rethink these types of programs, because there are a lot of the challenges out there. Sharon, you could just go to the next slide. A little bit of housekeeping. So we'll be an hour talk. We're going to have each of our panelists present a point of view around the topic, and then we'll welcome your questions. We want you to put your questions into the question window, and we'll take those at the end of our perspective sessions. There'll also be a survey at the end, so we want you to be sure to fill that out. We'll have some poll questions you can participate in, and if you want to tweet about this, we have the hashtag early roundtable. My background, many of you know who I am. Again, won't spend a lot of time on this. I actually do a lot of research in this space, a lot of writing. We have a number of resources for you at the end of the session, a number of articles that I've written. One of them that's been very well received called "There's No AI Without IA," and you'll get a chance to look at the URL for that. I actually spoke at the MIT CIO Symposium a couple of weeks ago on a panel on putting AI to work, and that was a tweetable moment. There's no AI without IA. There's no artificial intelligence without information architecture, and that's kind of the premise that we talk about, is that there's no magic here. But let's talk about conversational commerce. So we hit some of the other aspects of bots and virtual assistants, and conversational commerce is kind of a different way of looking at this. It could be considered all-encompassing, this definition, delivering convenience, personalization, decision support, really with partial attention. That's the idea, is that you're getting a slice of people's attention. It's using chat, it's using messaging, it's giving people a way of interacting with natural language. So you're either typing a question in or you're speaking a question, and it's interacting with bots, with people, and it's not necessarily just a bot. It can be a combination of human bots. So the whole idea of conversational commerce is it's a broader concept that we're talking about. And it actually was coined by Chris Messina, who is the former UX user experience designer at Uber and Google. And he also was credited with inventing the hashtag. So I've seen a lot of attribution around that. But in any case, let me talk about some of the benefits to this. And these benefits don't come without some effort. So we talk about reduction of friction. What does that mean? Personalization, contextualization, synchronization, international interaction, zero barrier to adoption, starting conversation. And by the way, I meant to add the reference. This came from Chris Messina's article. So I just want to give that attribution. So Karen, if you can go to the next slide and kind of talk a little bit about, well, what are the implications here, right? Because if you look at this, this list of benefits, reduction of friction, what does that mean? Well, it means that we message all the time, right? It's part of our experience. But what does that really mean when it comes to what you have to do? Well, now you have to figure out a way to engage with people. It may be seamless, it may be have a little friction, but you have to start thinking about interactions in a different way. They're these very small slices of people's attention, and our other panelists are going to talk about this. But how do you retain your identity when you're outside of the context of a website or your brand? Personalization is great. Yes, you have lots of additional signals. You have more geospatial and time context when people are on a mobile device, for example. But it still begs the question of what is meaningful. What do you need to personalize on, right? You need to understand people's preferences and demographics and histories and what are their interests? What are they trying to do? Now, there's certainly a downside. We want to be able to respect privacy. We need to make sure we understand what people want. But it's really saying, how do I align preferences with a meaningful experience? We go through this all the time. This is omni-channel personalization has the same problem, right? This is another channel. Chatbots are a channel. And no matter what the channel, when you're trying to personalize, well, what's personalized? How do you know your customer well enough to say this content is going to be meaningful to them in this particular context? It's the same problem. You may have the ability to do more of it, but you still have to solve the same problem. We've seen this with organizations. We've built content models and data architectures and processes to allow for content to be personalized. And then you say, okay, well, what's personalized content for this person in this context? And people look at each other and go, I don't know. So you still have to answer that question. Contextualization, same idea. You have more signals about intent, but what do those signals tell us, right? What do they tell us about the moment-to-moment needs? And you have a new mobile context, but then you lose that other context, right? So now you're divorced of, if it's outside of the website, you have a smaller footprint. Chris is going to talk about this later. And so you now lose that context. You gain additional context, but you lose another brand context. How about synchronized streams? What's interesting about this is great for the most part, right? Skype pops up on my phone and my laptop and my desktop, but maybe I don't always want that, right? You really have to understand and respect preferences and understand the needs of the user in those device contexts, right? Because you don't necessarily want that. The natural interactions, great. Natural language, that gives us, again, additional richness of the signal for intent. Instead of just putting in a term in a search bar, you're asking a full question, right? And that's great, except now you have to start understanding that question. You need to start thinking about your domain of your products and your services and your offerings and the synonyms and the different language variations, right? You need to consider the taxonomies, the ontologies, the curated content. All of that is even more important in this context, right? Because you're trying to be very precise about what you're giving people. And that also means you have to manage the use cases and model the use cases and model the scenarios and so on. This whole idea of the zero barrier to adoption, again, it's native in a lot of our applications, but this still requires even more thoughtful design because you really have a very small footprint. You really have a very small slice of time. So you have different contexts. You really need to be creative about the user experience and about the approaches. Actually, Chris Messina, in one of the links we provide at the end, has some very interesting ways of guiding a user through a conversation and also presenting richer content. So there's a lot you can do with these interfaces. It's not just about sending a chat and receiving a chat. It's about a rich user experience that you can build out. Now, again, starting a conversation rather than downloading the app. The question is, and the idea here is, oh, you invite this bot to discussion. You begin the process. Well, how do you start that, right? How do you initiate that? How do you engage? And there's a lot of bad bots out there. So you really have to think about what's the context? What am I going to try to help this user? Why are they going to engage? And it's getting that attention, it's retaining that attention, and it really, really is dependent on having a very high value experience. So those are the great benefits, but there's a lot of details and nuances. Now, you can also kind of think about this when you're tackling these things. You need to think about the complexity of the task and the complexity of your domain, right? So this is not hard and fast, right? This is just kind of a continuum, a way of thinking about it. But on the one end of the spectrum, you have very simple things that you're trying to do. You're just trying to enable a transaction in some way. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're trying to give people advice. You're trying to guide them. And when you think about virtual sales assistants, what does a real sales assistant do? They guide you. They help you solve your problem. They understand who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and they can give you direction. Or a salesperson can just help you buy the thing, right? Oh yeah, it's $5.95. Here's my credit card. That's a transaction. So you can think of the same thing. Any type of human interaction can be emulated, but it's going to take a lot more effort. And you can kind of think of a very complex domain. It might be a transaction, but there could be a lot more to that transaction. One of the things that Leslie, our other speaker, does is she does work with using these tools, these assistants, to manage very complex interactions. Well, that's much harder to do, and you need to think about it in a different way, even though it's a transaction. So again, you can kind of think of yourself along these two continuum. The task complexities, some of these are just straight up knowledge retrieval around product support, maybe you're configuring, and then you have the complexity domain. So just a way to think about this. Now, I'm going to give you my takeaways on this from my perspective. And the first is, and I've said this over and over and throughout all the sessions, chatbots are a channel, right? Don't forget that. You still have to have the data. You still have to have the content. You still have to have those supporting processes to serve up the stuff that's meaningful for your users. People assume, and I've talked about this before, people assume there's a knowledge base. Well, not necessarily. And that knowledge base has to be in the right format and structure. You have to architect that knowledge for reuse. Your support content can be served up in lots of different ways. You're not necessarily creating an entirely new knowledge base, but you have to refactor it, right? You have to segment it. You have to componentize it. You have to make it consumable. And there's a lot of details around this. A lot of the vendors will take your content and process it and lock it away in their system. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to reuse the knowledge. I mentioned the user scenarios before. It's really finding the unambiguous processes that you can support, the repeatable things, and that requires analysis of call center logs and discussions and recordings and doing speech to text and then doing sentiment analysis. There's a lot of pieces to this, but you really want to understand this and build the maturity. And then the last one here is really use humans in the process. You can use human curators to ensure your bots are competent before you let them into the wild. And I'll show you a quick example of this. This is just a screenshot sanitized from a project that we're doing with a customer. And on the left, you see the customer, the actual end user that you're interacting with, and you have authenticated information so you can personalize. In the middle, you see at the top half of this, there's the topic that came in. I had to redact it, but it's basically doing the intent. It's classifying the intent. If the bot gets it wrong, you can change that. So a human says, yeah, that's about right. That's the right intent. Classifies it. And then it's giving an answer. It's giving a suggested answer. That's coming from the bot. And there's a confidence level. Now you can just send that off, or you can change it. And when you do this, you see the agent at the bottom. When you do this, you're actually training the bot. Now, there's obviously a lot of things that go on under the covers for this, but this is just one way to think about this. And even doing this will give your agents tremendous improvements in productivity. Now, again, one way of thinking about this. This is a particular organization that decided to do this. I think it's a good approach. I'm going to stop here. And what we'll do is we'll have our first poll. So Sharon, if you could pull up the next slide. The first is, I want to ask you guys, and I've asked this the other times, but on the other ones, but remember, this is for sales assistants to enable commerce. How important is it to your business? How important to your business are chatbots and virtual sales assistants? to enable commerce. If you've attended this session before and you've answered this question, you may have answered it in a different context, but this is really thinking about this from the perspective of commerce. So let's take a look at the results, and wow, really interesting in that, you know, not a priority. Okay, so a lot of you doing research, that's fine. Important, needs a business case, and then there's a few of you that are saying, hey, this is really important. This is important to a business. Good to understand. So thank you. So let's continue. And what we're going to do is turn this over to our first presenter. And this is Chris Daly. And Chris, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and take away.
Hi, good afternoon and good morning or good evening, wherever everybody happens to be. I'm Christopher Daly. I head up user experience and product design for Sotheby's. We're on the auction house side. I'm sure Sotheby's is exactly the brand you think of when you think of fast-moving digital. You know, a 270-year-old auction house that started as a small, dusty bookseller. I'm part of a team that's really trying to push the envelope and bring Sotheby's past the 17th century, past the 20th, even into the 21st. So I come to the table at Sotheby's with nearly 20 years of sort of UX and product design expertise. I've worked a lot across sort of a bunch of different agency and consulting environments and embedded on the client base to do a lot of financial services work, a lot of hospitality work, a lot of e-commerce work, all sectors and categories that have sort of a tremendous upside from a conversational commerce or from an AI standpoint. And this is one of a couple of opportunities I've had this year to talk on these particular topics. And I'm excited to continue that going. So we can move to the next slide. And really, I think the purpose of sort of me being on this panel with sort of this esteemed set of really sort of smart technology folks is, you know, coming from a design standpoint, coming from a user experience standpoint. And Seth touched on this earlier. It's unbelievably important as you roll out or as you think about chatbots as a standalone channel to realize it still needs to be ownable from a brand standpoint, from a user experience standpoint, from sort of the perspective of how that channel fits into the overall ecosystem that you have, and hopefully sort of a really sort of well-crafted and well-designed, comprehensive and cohesive ecosystem from channel to channel. And here's just a quick example looking at a really interesting and e-commerce brand, Spring, where, you know, if you think about their web channel, super easy to own that brand experience, because when you think about a website might be a single channel, but in fact, it's made up of hundreds of micro interactions and moments from site to pay, or from site to sort of individual sort of purchasing flows or browsing flows to individual pages, like a product detail page, to individual calls to action on those pages. And the cumulative total of each one of those calls to action, each one of those micro interactions, is the entirety of the channel. What's interesting, though, is that sort of the brand value of each one of those individual moments, you know, doesn't necessarily ring as significantly important in that sort of large-scale context of the web. Moving from web to sort of an app channel, still pretty easy to own sort of an experience and a brand experience within an app. There are higher degrees of need from a user standpoint. You need to download an app. You need to be able to find it. There's a smaller form factor. The attention span of users is probably significantly smaller, but you still have a significant brand and design aspect that you can bring to bear. And while the number of moments might be smaller, there's still a whole lot of them within sort of an app-to-app or a screen-to-screen experience within the app. Moving into chatbots, specifically unowned chatbots, if you are a slice within iMessenger or a slice within Facebook Messenger or within Line and WeChat in the Asian markets, you have a whole lot less opportunity to get the branding right, to get the sort of the tone right, and the number of individual sort of moments you've got is significantly sort of diminished. And if you even think about sort of your own sort of personal sort of chat interactions, even if it's not with chat bots, but with friends or with family, what does your sort of attention span look like? Are you in the middle of 93 different chats? You know, you think about that from a brand and business perspective. The noise that you're fighting against is quite tremendous. And so owning and understanding how you can deliver sort of brand value and the same sort of uniqueness of your business within these sort of chatbot environments is much more difficult within these chat pieces. And it's difficult, but it's not impossible to do. And so I think one of the key takeaways I want everyone to sort of walk away from here with today is the sense of it might be difficult to do, but it's unbelievably valuable to do so. And let's flip to the next slide, and we'll talk about why that is sort of super valuable to do so. So on the left, we see this quick chart, and it re-summarizes kind of what we just talked about, because in essence, the payoff for getting chat right from a brand service standpoint and from a sort of a business and brand delivery standpoint is really tremendous. So starting on the sort of the right side of that graph, if you're in store, if you're on desktop web, the overall footprint of those individual moments that we just talked about, those individual calls to action, those individual headers, even a page like a product detail page, you've got so many opportunities to get it right that any one individual moment is in fact the one individual moment itself only has a small kind of brand potential. And it's the cumulative total of all of the moments that make it valuable. Moving from sort of that right column to the middle, when you get into mobile apps or mobile web, mobile apps, watch apps or TV apps, your form factors are different, your attention spans are different, there are less moments, but you still need to deliver massive brand value there. So the individual value of each one of those moments becomes that much higher. And when we move now into the next generation of talking about chatbots or voice UIs and sort of what we call sort of app slices, or the presence of your brand within iMessenger, et cetera, you have so few opportunities to get it right but when you do get it right in that moment, the brand value of that individual moment is so much higher. So the smaller the digital footprint of that particular individual moment within your user's journey, really the bigger the potential to build brand value is. And in my mind, that's the really astonishing and amazing part of what AI and chatbots can do in the future, is deliver these great brand values in really, really small bits.
And, that's such an interesting perspective when you think it's counterintuitive in a way, because you're saying, well, wouldn't I have a bigger impact on my brand with this bigger format and lots of other ways of interacting? But what you're saying is it's for that slice of time when you have that bit of attention. That's when you're talking about maximizing that value. Very, very interesting. Okay, Sharon, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, did you want to finish your thought? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's just like, buying a house. When you buy a house, you buy the whole house, but it's the moments inside the house that, sitting in a particular chair or getting a particular view that makes it sort of truly valuable. And that's what sort of the next generation of chatbots is going to do.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. So let's go ahead and do our next poll. This should get people paying more attention, because I have a little indicator for those who are not paying attention. I don't know how the system determines that, but it does. How far along are you in using chatbots or virtual test assistants? Are you conducting initial investigation? Are you in an R&D lab deployment? Are you doing a pilot, a limited pilot? Or are you at scale, or are you not doing it at all? So please take a few moments, and let's get your attention on this poll. If you could go ahead and answer the poll, let us know what you're doing. Okay, so looks like most of you are not doing it. So it looks like a couple of folks are deploying at scale. So a couple of pilots and a couple at scale, but the rest are some initial investigation, some labs. So early in the cycle. So let's go ahead and turn it over to our next presenter, and this is going to be Gary Gerber. Gary is with Conversica. So Gary, you should have the control of the screen.
I believe I do.
Awesome. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you very much, Seth. Appreciate it. Hi, folks. Thanks, everyone, for attending today. Really excited to be here. My name is Gary Gerber, and I head up product marketing for Conversica. Conversica is an interesting company. We've been involved in AI, chatbots, and automated sales assistants for many years, and deployed them for thousands of companies, for tens of thousands of people. And so we've been fortunate enough to accumulate a lot of interesting information about what makes a successful chatbot and how people are using them. So hopefully I can share some of that wisdom here that'll help others be successful as they consider them. So we've been asked to give some takeaways. So I have 3 takeaways for you folks. And my first takeaway is that people think of chatbots and they tend to kind of lump them into one thing, and really not all chatbots are the same. They tend to fall, at least on a broad perspective, into a couple of different camps. And the first one is what I'd call reactive chatbots, and I think most of us have interacted with one of these at one time or another on a website. This is, you reach out to the chatbot and say, I would like to know what colors you have, or can you help me with an order? and the chatbot responds and tries to give you what you've asked for. And these are great. They're super helpful. These are really good, especially as we've seen. If you've interacted one, it was probably for customer support. And the beauty of this, if deployed in a customer support environment, is you can generally reduce costs. You can provide a very high level of customer support for your customers. They can really get what they need, and you don't have to add tons of people or tons of resources to accomplish it. The second type of chatbot, and this one is not quite as commonly seen in the wild, is what I call a proactive chatbot. So as opposed to a reactive one where the person on the other end is initiating the activity and the chatbot is doing what needs to be done as a response, a proactive chatbot, when deployed by your business, is actively trying to drive a behavior that your business would like to see happen. It still creates a good experience for the person on the other side, but in this case, as you can see in this sample, the chatbot is actually trying to drive the individual towards a conclusion. Would you like to talk to somebody? Would you like to speak to a salesperson? Would you like more information? And driving that behavior to be a yes or a no. Yes, I'd like to interact with a salesperson. So a proactive chatbot tends to be good for augmenting your sales team, right? Because it enhances their ability to be successful. And therefore, its goals are generally boosting revenue. And again, reducing costs is a great thing. Boosting revenue is a good thing. Which types of chatbots you deploy are very situationally dependent. So I think as far as the reactive chatbots go, again, we all kind of have interacted with them. How that helps save costs and improve customer support is kind of obvious. It may not be quite as obvious how a sales augmentation of proactive chatbot can help. So let's take a look at the most common application. First thing is people tend to think of AI, and you hear all the time, oh, job killer, job killer. And that's really not the case. In fact, many of the people we speak with, many of the companies who've deployed AI for sales augmentation will say that they've actually increased the number of people they've hired as a result, because the AI augments the team so well that they need additional people to handle the extra opportunities and close the deals, which is the kind of thing that people are very good at. And why is that? So if you think about it, you have to reach out to engage someone in order to get them to be interested in buying something. And all the statistics show you need to reach out approximately 8 to 10 times to actually generally reach someone, because people are very busy. And so the greater the number of attempts you try to reach someone, the more likely you are to reach them and sell them something. But on the other hand, it's pretty evident that as you try harder and harder, you're more likely to reach them, but also the number of attempts, the value of each attempt diminishes. And so smart salespeople, I mean, they're not being lazy, they're being intelligent, they want to use their time well. They'll generally, on average, stop at about 2 contacts. Because after that, as you can see on the curve, the results diminish, and they're going to move on to the next lead, to the next prospect, to increase the likelihood of success. But the problem is that's a conflict, because from the organization's perspective, you'd rather have them reaching out more so they reach more people. And the problem is there's really no cost-effective way to bridge that gap. How do you reach out to all those people, the number of times it takes to reach them, and yet let the salespeople do what's smart and only try a couple? And that's where automation comes into play. That's where an AI sales assistant comes into play. And the AI sales assistant can cost-effectively reach out to every single one of the prospects as frequently, over as long a period of time as it takes, in a very friendly way, to try to engage people in a happy, helpful conversation. And that fills the gap. And on average, you're going to get about 30% more sales or sales appointments because you're able to fill that gap. And there's really no other way to do it cost effectively. Hiring more people wastes the resource, or basically hiring more people wastes the resource. And the third takeaway I have is that, AI, there's a lot of AI out there, and we saw Microsoft put out Tay, and there's Watson, there's lots of great AI technology. But if you're going to be deploying it in your organization, you need more than just a good AI technology. If you're just going to put AI in for AI's sake, it's really just a science experiment. So what you really need is a comprehensive infrastructure. So types of things that you need usually multiple types of AI, right? Because you're going to be looking at what's the person's intent and what's a good way to respond and what were they actually saying. You need to generate the language and interpret the language. So multiple types of AI. And you're going to need to be able to infer what are they trying to achieve. And you're going to need something that can create appropriate on-the-fly messaging to respond to them. And you're going to need some kind of a training, as Seth mentioned earlier. You need, the AI is not going to be perfect every single time, so you need people in the background to train it, to make sure that it does know what to do and is confident in its interactions with the humans. And you need things like dashboards. How do you know what it's doing, and how do you know how it's helping your sales team? And integration, right? If it sits in isolation, that's really no good. It needs to interact with a CRM, and you need communications. Is it going to be via email? Is it going to be via SMS, et cetera? So the idea here is, again, you should certainly be dabbling, but if you actually plan to gain the benefit, the cost savings or the revenue boost, you're going to want to deploy in a way that has an entire infrastructure beneath it. And with that, I'm going to hand on back to Seth.
Terrific. We're going to have one more poll here. So Sharon, if you want to put up the next slide and show the poll, the lead generation. This is, again, in your conversational commerce, pre-sales support, FAQs, product information, product selection, configuration, sales transactions, or something else. Something else could be none of the above, if you would, Sharon. And let's see how this looks. So it looks like the winner is pre-sales support, but since you could select multiple categories, it looks like product selection, pre-sales support, and sales transaction. And for the something else, please put that into your chat window, your question window, if you would, just so I could get a sense of what that is. And don't forget to start teeing up your questions now.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm losing the sound all of a sudden. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Leslie, we can hear you fine.
Can't hear Seth.
Okay, great. So thank you. My name is Leslie Swanson. I'm the president and CEO of Exalt Solutions. Our tagline is sell more, more profitably. Basically, our mission is to make sales processes digital end-to-end without human touch. We offer a platform we call our Knowledge Work as a Service platform, and it offers companies digital workers, specifically digital advisors that make buyers instant experts so they can do more than just shop. They can actually solve real business problems. And administrators that take over manual high-touch work, and analysts that can anticipate and act on change. I have a few decades of experience with what Seth calls the IA part of AI, and I'm very, very excited about this new era with digital transformation and this digital disruption. From our perspective, we see that the digital disruption has three major points of impact on the business. First, how your customers want to interact with you in the front office, and I guess the executive summary there is the phone is dying, if not dead, right? Second point of that impact is in the back office, where Moore's Law has taken over business processes, where you're going to have to be 2 times faster, not just every few years, but probably every year. Agility is critical for today's customer experience. And the third point of impact is because of this rapid rate of change, you really need exceptional visibility today, and you need exceptional decision velocity. Because everything's happening faster and faster, you can't use humans to just spot trends or in many cases even make decisions. So the future, if not today, what we see is that it's critical for survival, that you identify all of the rules-based and repetitive work that happens in your company, and leverage digital workers to take over that work. If you are skeptical about that or doubt that, the next slide really outlines, I think, some of the supporting information for this. On the left side, with our first point of impact with the front office, it's no secret that people prefer to purchase without a salesperson. But what a lot of folks we meet may not be aware of is that today buyers are actually 2/3 of the way through their purchase decision before they even contact a sales rep. So this means your salespeople are no longer the ones influencing the sale, and they're actually being contacted at the end of the process, not at the beginning. So best case, you could end up competing on price. In worst case, you may never be called. So we really see that these digital advisors are critical to your survival because they're what are influencing and shaping demand up front, because you can't do it over the phone anymore. The second key stat here in the first column is if you're saying, I'm not really seeing that yet. My customers are still calling me and appreciate the relationship. Keep in mind that 27% of the U.S. population is millennials, and no secret there, they probably do not want to use the phone. And they are the ones that are the largest and fastest growing in terms of spending power. And then finally, people really see human interaction as risky. Only 13% believe that a salesperson understands their needs. 13%. Buyers don't want to just find a product. They want to find an optimal solution. They want advice on not just something they can buy in terms of price, but they want to optimize TCO, ROI. They might be looking at power and other constraints to really find out what's best for them. So needless to say, they can't call up a sales rep and do dozens and dozens of what-ifs on the phone. They need something in their hands that they can drive to optimize these decisions. So it's critical for companies today to weaponize their PDFs, weaponize their case studies, their Excel spreadsheets, all of these things that are your assets today, and instead make them digital self-service advisors. And these advisors should do a seamless handoff to your back office. So what the key stat here is, you'll see 22% of sales reps' time's actually spent selling. That means you're losing 78% of your sales productivity every day. It's getting lost because reps are doing qualification and they may not do it as efficiently as a digital assistant, right? It's lost because they're having to do all of this administrative work of entering content into their CRM or their ERP, which could be done seamlessly, again, with a digital administrator. And we also see a lot of wasted time because there really isn't a digital administrator that manages and makes sure that there isn't a proper handoff. A very high-end, high-value sales opportunity should be handed off to your best people. And you need a load balancer or an agent, right, to make sure that this matching is happening seamlessly. So that's the other value if you start the process digitally. And then finally, in B2B, we find that there's an entire cadre of partners that a sales rep has to spend their valuable time reaching. They have to go get pricing, promotions, they have to register deals, they have to check availability, and they have to do this across an entire ecosystem of vendors, distributors, and resellers. And finally, in this new era, if you do build a digital thread from the front office to the back office, these threads are now smart. And a smart thread can make sure that it spots trends. You should be able to ensure that each transaction is profitable. I can't tell you the number of companies that we see that actually spend more money on a transaction than they make. It happens more often than you'd like to think. And ideally, you'd be able to establish SLAs. So again, I guess the summary is we believe the key to survival is a better together strategy. Accenture has a great quote here about the future where they took a poll and found that 78% of businesses believe that a successful business will have employees working alongside intelligent machines. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. And so we're going to open up to your questions. So please put your questions in the chat window, in the question window. And I'd also like to, Sharon, if you could just go to the next slide, just to point to the resources that people can take a look at as well. So there's a whole range of things that you can look at. We have a page of AI resources. I mentioned the There's No AI Without IA article. It's been very well received. It kind of explains how you need to think about architecture. And it's funny, there was a conversation that a customer had with a vendor, and they said, well, what's the role of taxonomy and metadata? They said, oh, you know, taxonomy can throw the algorithm off. And my head exploded. That's absolutely, there's nothing further from the truth. You know, you can always make these things more effective with ontologies, taxonomies, curated content. So a lot we can talk about with that. But I wanted to begin, Sharon, if you just go back to the prior slide with our panelists, and you can direct questions specifically to the panelists. Oh, by the way, for the something else that people talked about, maintenance, repair, and overhaul was one of the applications that was being used, and the other one was information and educational support to increase usage of a product, overall usage of a product. So that's where people are also using conversational commerce. So one of the questions we have is, you know, a lot of folks are beginning. We make a very strong case to say, you know, there's too much information for a salesperson to understand. Support costs are high. You know, we have to improve the customer experience. There's all this motherhood and apple pie. But from a realistic perspective, you know, there's a lot of choices out there. There's a lot of technologies. There's a lot of complexity, and a lot of vendors. So how do you separate the noise and the nonsense from the reality? I'll start with that one. And why don't I begin with Chris? Chris, what's your perspective on separating signal from noise, I guess you'd say, in terms of this crowded, noisy marketplace?
You know, it's for me, and from a UX perspective and from a design thinking perspective, it's always about sort of user centricity and understanding what the customer journey really does look like. And so, you know, there's, in my mind, a lot of the noise comes from either anecdotal evidence or internal and enterprise thinking, outbound thinking, oh, I think this is the way our customers think, or this looks like a good solution, or this is a new shiny toy, we should deploy it, when in fact, you know, reversing that process and really doing as thorough a job as possible, as quickly as possible, to map out what those customer journeys look like, what those ecosystems should look like, figure out where the pain points are, and then start to apply, you know, figure out what the best potential technology solution is. I think within the world of conversational commerce, because it is such a hot button technology right now, there's a rush to judgment to say, oh, we need this, but they don't. A lot of companies don't even know why they need it. They just think they do. Right. And so, you know, I think the signal comes from, you know, a deep understanding of what client pain points or what customer pain points are, and putting those into context.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's easy to get distracted by the shiny bits, right? It's easy to get thrown off by the vendor pitch. And remember, vendors are better at selling things than you are at buying things, because that's what they do all day. And you don't buy those things every day unless procurement. But the point here is that, you know, there's going to be lots of pitches. There's going to be lots of misinformation. And I think you really have to validate. Number one, I think Chris is on the right track, starting with that user experience, starting with that life cycle, mapping your customer journeys and understanding where in this process do I have something that is unambiguous and that's repeatable that I can start to facilitate, or where is the information just so complex that I need to give people a mechanism to get through this information and make it more effective. And I also look at this as a continuum. At the one end of the spectrum, you just have information retrieval, which could be search, could be navigation, you're searching, you're retrieving information. A bot, again, is a channel. You're still trying to retrieve information. You're still trying to get an answer. So you still have to think about the knowledge architecture behind this. Let's see, we have another question. Gary, did you want to add to that? Did you want to add from the vendor perspective? What's your vendor advice to?
Thank you, Seth. Actually, you saw me squirming because I actually did want to add. First, I agree with everything that Chris and you both said, but in addition to that, again, taking it back to one of my 3 takeaways, there's a tremendous amount of noise, and part of it is because the technology itself is evolving so rapidly, which is great and exciting to watch. But again, if it's just just AI, and it doesn't have an infrastructure behind it that ensures a successful deployment, then that's kind of worthless. At best, it's worthless, and at worst, you have a Tay type of situation where something terrible happens in front of people with your brand on it. So a key way to sift out the noise is to say, look closely at what you're being sold. And am I being sold a piece of technology, which probably doesn't do me any good as a business, unless that's my core business? Or am I being sold a solution that has an entire architecture behind it, entire infrastructure behind it, to Leslie's point, that allows you to integrate the AI with your current environment, that allows you to make sure it's doing what it should be doing, that allows you to really gain the benefit, be it saving money or being it increasing revenue.
Yeah, that's great, and I think the proof is in your use cases being displayed in whatever the application is. And again, it's an emerging area. Don't believe things. If the promises sound unrealistic, they're unrealistic, and there's no magic here. And if it's a 2-week deployment, and you don't have to do anything. I mean, again, just be realistic. Leslie, anything you want to add to the discussion about dealing with the hype and the noise in the marketplace?
No, I think Chris and Gary addressed it very well, but it starts with a customer journey. You have to start with the problem that the customer is trying to solve. For example, in IT, right, we often try to get people to distinguish between a new equipment purchase versus a refresh, right, or a renewal versus an initial software license. And if you start with that, then all of the noise does kind of calm down very, very quickly, because you're hitting the center of the target for the customer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I have another question here. What are the big trends for how AI is being deployed for post-sales support? So troubleshooting, instruction, and sharing. I'm not sure what we mean by sharing. Oh, sharing experience. I'm sorry. I didn't scroll down enough. It's sharing experience. So it's basically post-sales support. So, it's interesting. I think, again, and when you look at that customer journey, how do people typically get post-sales support? They'll pick up the call and call a call center if they have to, and try to get, their problem solved. They'll go to a website and try to search for information in a knowledge base. They'll go to a community and try to post a question and see if anybody's answered that. One of the things that we're seeing is the use of the community with a community bot. And that's kind of an interesting approach. It's using the tool, the AI, to mine the community for trends and sentiment and answers, and then be able to surface, say, community recommendations for a particular user. So you're basically, instead of the user, how big communities can be, right? There can be hundreds or thousands of discussions or dialogues or entries or answers. And basically what you're doing is using the tool to parse through that and sift through and get the most relevant answer. So it is another information retrieval process, but it's doing it in a little bit different way. There's some curation in there, and there's some automated techniques. So you're looking for the trends, you're looking for the answers in this large repository of community-based crowdsourced information, and then surfacing up in the bot. Not easy, and I think that the use cases are fairly narrow, but I think that's an interesting trend. It's kind of the combination of crowdsourcing and bot technology and AI to make sense of that. Any other trends that folks are seeing? I'll just leave that open to the panel.
Well, Seth, one thing that's interesting is your example is an interesting one, because when you get into a community environment, you really get into conversation that can be extremely casual in its style, and so it becomes that much more incumbent upon the AI to be able to discern intent. You know, somebody, if you're interacting with a chatbot in a customer service perspective, you probably wouldn't say this, but if you're chatting with other folks, you might say, oh, this product is really dope. But you might also say that person is a dope, and they mean very, very different things, and the AI needs to be able to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a big challenge with overall sentiment analysis, because you can have the slang and colloquial ways of speaking, and that are counter that are not literal, right? So,
right, and communities bring those out.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on trends that folks are seeing, or things that are emerging? So we have another question about what are the traps, what are the gotchas, what are the things people need to watch out for if you look at deployments, and we've seen some that are less successful. The thing that I'll take this question to begin with and then throw it out to the panel, but I think that the gotchas are giving up control of your content and data. I think that's the biggest gotcha. We've seen that happen where people say, the vendor will say, give us 6 months, $2 million and all your content, and we'll train the AI, right? That will train the AI. How do you train the AI? Well, you're training the AI with your knowledge and your data and your content, and you need to retain ownership of that. Because if you turn it over, what they're doing is they're pre-processing it, structuring it, and curating it, and getting it into a format where their tool can make sense of it. And that's actually something you guys should do. You should retain the competency in that. You need to keep control of your data, because that is your differentiator. So we've seen that, and what happens is it's caused vendor lock-in, and it's also caused an inability to quickly evolve the system. So that's one that I would watch out for. And certainly the other is again, those unrealistic expectations. When they say, oh, you don't have to do anything, you don't need to, just use common sense, right? There's no magic here. And again, there's a lot of good research out there that helps validate that. What other gotchas do folks want to let people know about? Leslie, Gary, Chris?
This is Chris. I'll jump. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yep, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say death by genericism, in the sense that because a lot of these pieces look the same, a lot of the executions off the shelf feel the same. What is the brand's tone? What is the manner of speech? Is there a personification behind the type of app or type of chat experience you're trying to create, and making sure there is, again, back to the point earlier, a sense of ownership around this is part of my ecosystem and is a direct line of sight on who we are as a brand and a value, and isn't just something that's off the shelf. That, to me, is a gotcha.
That's a great point. I'll interject and then turn it over to Leslie. One of the things that a presenter at a conference said a while back is there's going to be a lot of bad bots out there, and there will be bots that will become celebrities. We're like, celebrities? Like, what do you mean a bot's a celebrity? Well, we actually built a bot that has a Facebook page for, I can't say who it is because it's not public yet, but built a Facebook page for a bot that is the face of the organization. Well, people have Facebook pages, they have a personality, they have photos, they have stories, and the same thing is going to happen with bots. Bots are going to become a representation. That's actually another good trend to think about, a representation of your brand, and they will have a personality, and they will start to have a history, and they will have to have a story behind them. So I really believe that brands have that now. You have characters that are that well known and become famous, and you can have the same thing happening with bots. So I say that's an interesting thing to keep in mind, and it's part of that ownership and not being generic, but really expressing that brand experience in your bot. Leslie, did you want to add to the discussion?
Yeah, it's just taking off on this need for openness. With a customer journey, really nothing is sold alone in the environments that we work with. For example, you might be a server or a laptop manufacturer or pedestal manufacturer, but then you have to be compatible with certain type of software, or you have to be compatible with certain types of keyboards, monitors. You have to be compatible with stuff that you may not sell. So one of the things that we think will be a trend is keeping your content open and the ability to associate in the ecosystem. So that's something that we really see as a key in the future.
Interesting. Gary, any other thoughts around the gotchas?
No, just agree with everything people were saying, especially the concept of the AI having a personality and being potentially famous, or at least representing your brand. That's very much happening today with many solutions, and so it's a key consideration.
There's a comment here about bots. 50% of Trump's social media followers are bots. That's an estimate that one of our listeners came up with. Very interesting. So one of the last questions that I'll just very quickly answer. It really is about identifying the right problem. So one of the questions is, how do I identify a good problem to begin to tackle? And I think this reflects, and it's also part of the question. Following question here is making that business case. I think we had a lot of good ammunition today for understanding this as a trend, understanding the drivers. But at the end of the day, when it comes to your organization, it really is about understanding that customer and being realistic and starting off conservatively, and trying to solve a very specific problem and looking at repeatable processes. And again, thinking of this as a continuum. If you don't have a good experience on your support site, on top of it, solve that problem, right? You need to look at fundamentals and make sure that you have a good understanding of the types of things that your users need. So mining those call logs, doing the speech to, if you're recording them, doing the speech to text, and analyzing the conversations and the interactions. A great place to mine the use cases. Looking for those repeatable interactions. You can look at your site metrics, your search metrics. There's a whole bunch of different places where you're trying to find the things that are very repeatable and that are very unambiguous, at least to begin with, or very clear. At the top of the hour, I do want to thank our panelists, Chris, Gary, Leslie. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you to the folks who are participating and asking questions. So let's go ahead and end the session now. And the recording will be Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks, for attending. I think we've lost Seth, but thank you, everyone, very much. Have a good day.
Thanks all.
Yep, thank you.